Hello everybody and welcome to this video. My name is Madison and I hope everyone is having an amazing day, night, whatever's going on. I'm a senior in high school, so it's safe to say that I've read my fair share of school books, Romeo and Juliet, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Great Gatsby. I'm now realizing that a lot of those books were centered around white people and their struggles. Anyways, I can confidently say that the book we just finished reading in my English class has to be my all-time favorite book that I've ever read in high school. And just for reference, this isn't a normal English class. It's English with an emphasis on social justice, so that might be a factor in why we're reading a lot better books, but still, it's my favorite. Anyways, with that aside, let's get into what I actually want to talk about in this video, the book. The amazing book I'm talking about is called The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. Now, if you haven't read it, well, go read it, obviously. It's an amazing book. No, but for real, if you haven't read it, I'll give you a little bit of a background before we get into the real meat of the video. And just before we start everything, I want to have a trigger warning for the topics discussed in this book. So The Kite Runner follows a young boy, our main character Amir, as he grows up and deals with the consequences of his actions that he did when he was a young boy. He grew up in Kabul, Afghanistan in the 70s with his father, Baba. Him and Baba are part of a predominantly majority group in Afghanistan called the Pashtuns. So yeah, he lives with his father, Baba, and their two servants, Ali and Hassan. And Ali and Hassan are a part of the minority group that has, they're called the Hazaras. They've been historically persecuted and discriminated against wherever they go. So it's important to know that in this story because it plays a huge part in the relationships between Amir and Hassan, because Amir and Hassan are about a year apart, and also with Baba and Ali because they grew up together in the same home. So they've always just known each other as basically brothers. So these are really important relationships to know before we get into it. So this hierarchy between the Pashtuns and the Hazaras is just a really reoccurring theme throughout the story and is a huge factor in the decisions made by certain characters that we'll talk about later. Another important character I want to point out is Rahim Khan. He's like a close friend or business partner with Baba, and he plays sort of a mentor role in the life of Amir, and so we'll see his impact as well. This book deals with a lot of serious real-life themes that I believe are just so well represented. The ones I'm going to be focusing on today are the ones that really stuck out to me as a reader. These are betrayal, guilt, forgiveness, and redemption. And I put them in that order kind of intentionally because I feel like that's the way that the story progresses throughout those themes. I mean, it goes back and forth a little, but mainly that's kind of the path that you go through from the initial betrayal to redemption at the end, And this video is going to be focused on Amir and his journey through those themes. So without further ado, let's get into part one. So obviously, the most notable example of betrayal in The Kite Runner is the kite tournament. When Amir wins the tournament, Hassan runs to fetch the kite for Amir to bring to his father. Amir goes to look for Hassan afterwards and finds him cornered in an alley with Asef and his two henchmen. Now, Asef is, he's like a couple years older than Amir and Hassan, and he is part German, so he has blonde hair and blue eyes. And his whole thing is he is just constantly praising and defending Hitler. And he believes that what Hitler did to the Jews that they should do to the Hazaras. So you can see how badly this encounter will end up being. So yeah, Amir is hiding and watching this encounter occur, and it escalates until Asaf ends up raping Hassan. And while this is happening, Amir is having his own internal struggle. Should he defend his friend that he grew up with all of his life, that he nursed from the same breast with, the one who has constantly stood up for him in his time of need when he couldn't even stand up for himself? Or should he stay out of it and not risk losing the kite, the thing that is the key to gaining the acceptance and approval of his father, Baba? And in the end, he chooses the kite. But it extends even further to that when Amir can't even look at Hassan afterwards. He just doesn't even want to see him at all because it reminds him of the decision he made, and it fills him with so much guilt. So this betrayal then extends to the other members of his household, Ali and Baba. What he does is, after his birthday, he takes his birthday money and the watch that his father gave him and hide him under Hassan's pillow in their little hut that they live in next to the house, and basically frames Hassan that he stole the money in order to get him kicked out of the house, him and Ali kicked out of the house. And of course, when Baba asks Hassan if he stole it, he says yes, just defending the likes of Amir over and over. And Baba immediately forgives him, which just surprised Amir completely, because Baba's whole thing that he taught Amir was that theft is the only sin, and that if you steal from another, like, you know, you're worthless, basically. And this really struck a chord with Amir, because he wondered why Baba was being so forgiving towards Hassan. Like what was so different about Hassan in Baba's eyes? He's just a Hazara boy, you know, like this is what was going through Amir's head. And we'll talk about that difference later. Ali ends up saying that they must leave, so he and Hassan move out of Baba's house, and in turn leave the safety and security of living with such a high power person in Afghanistan. And this also, I think, was a betrayal towards Baba, because I mean, all of his life he's lived with Ali, and him and Hassan are so close to him, and I don't even know what else to say. It's the worst. The last instance of betrayal I want to talk about is way later in the book, when Amir is an adult and has a wife and is living in America in the early 2000s. He gets a call from Rahim Khan telling him to come visit him in Peshawar because he's really sick and he wants to see him. And so he does. Amir goes to visit Rahim Khan, and when he does, Rahim Khan tells him about his experience living in Kabul after Baba and Amir left. And so he's living in Kabul in Baba's house during the war in Afghanistan. He ends up finding Hassan in Hazarajat, in a small village with his pregnant wife, and he convinces them to come move back to Kabul and live in Baba's house with him. They live together, and Hassan's wife gives birth to a son, Sorab, who is a key character in this betrayal. And so it ends up that the Taliban takes control of Kabul and Afghanistan, and while Rahim Khan is away from the house for some time, Hassan and his wife are killed by Taliban officials. Sorab is taken to an orphanage, and Rahim Khan basically tells him that it's up to Amir to save him and, you know, bring him to safety. So I'll talk more about this journey back to Afghanistan later, But for now, I just want to skip ahead to when he does end up finding Surab and is trying to bring him back to America with him. And there was a point where Amir promised Surab that he would never ever put him in an orphanage ever again. That was the one thing that Surab said he would never do again. He would never go to an orphanage. And he, oh my god, I can't even handle this. Literally, it makes me so angry. Amir finds out that the only way to bring him to America is to put him in an orphanage and go through the system and be able to bring him. And for some reason, he decides to tell Surab this. And of course, Surab is beside himself. He's so angry. He can't do it. This is the one thing. He's getting betrayed and let down in every instance throughout his entire life, and this is just another person letting him down. So he's beside himself because he promised. This is the one thing he promised to do. And then he just goes to sleep. Amir. That night, Surab ends up attempting to kill himself, and just overall that whole exchange basically changed Surab. From that point on, he took a vow of silence, and he just became extremely reclusive, and it's really heartbreaking, honestly. And on that note, let's get into part 2. Now, after the events I talked about in the last section, it's pretty clear that you would feel some form of guilt after betraying, your family, basically. And so in this section, we'll be talking about how guilt is portrayed through Amir and the way in which guilt affects him and distorts his perception on things and makes him do things. So directly after the betrayal with Hassan at the kite tournament, Amir feels so guilty that he becomes extremely cold towards Hassan and stops wanting to do the things that they would normally do together, because every time he interacts with Hassan, he is reminded of what he did and the guilt that comes along with that. When they finally hang out again for the first time, they walk up to their typical spot, the pomegranate tree. Amir ends up beginning to pelt Hassan with the pomegranates, trying to get a rise out of him because he's craving that reaction of anger from Hassan so that he can feel as if he's relieved of that guilt that he has in some sense, because he knew about what happened with Asef in the alley, and he wants some form of punishment for it through Hassan reacting and throwing a pomegranate back or something, because in his mind that would free him of what he's feeling right now. And of course, Amir doesn't get the reaction he wants out of Hassan because Hassan is amazing and Amir doesn't even deserve him. But that's beside the point. Amir only thinks about himself in these situations. He never stops to think about what happened and how much Hassan is hurting because of what happened to him. He never once thinks about that. It's truly painful to read this book sometimes because of Amir's thoughts. And so since he couldn't get the relief he wanted from Hassan, this guilt drove him to get Hassan and get Ali just completely out of his life so that he doesn't have to be reminded of it. And of course, the guilt never leaves in this way because there's just more guilt added onto the fact that he had to lie and betray his friend again just to do that. When Baba and Amir leave Afghanistan, this is true again because Amir sees America as his path to a new life where he can start fresh and escape this ghost of Hassan that was following him in Afghanistan. And I'd say he somewhat achieves this. He goes to school, he meets his wife, Soraya, and he publishes a few novels, and basically he forms a pretty good life for himself in the Bay Area in America. But obviously it still lives with him, And when he finds out that he's unable to have children with Soraya for no real medical reason, he just sees this as a divine force of justice being bestowed upon him because of his actions when he was a little boy. Not only did Amir live with guilt for most of his life, he also sought forgiveness during this time as well. And of course, he goes through achieving this in all the wrong ways. In my opinion, in order for Amir to achieve forgiveness, I believe he would have had to forgive himself first and foremost, but also own up to what he did and tell Hassan basically that he knew and he messed up, and gain that forgiveness from Hassan. And I mean, the latter is easier because Hassan is just so gracious and so forgiving of everything that Amir does. But he still didn't even try to accomplish this. With that, how can he possibly forever forgive himself for what he did when he was 12 years old? On that note, since Hassan has passed, how can he truly be forgiven? The person he betrayed is gone, and he never even knew, or we never knew if he knew that Amir betrayed him. So all along, he's trying to achieve forgiveness from other sources other than himself and Hassan. So when Rahim Khan gives him the proposition to go and find Sohrab, you'd think he would be jumping at that opportunity to finally do something good after just doing everything wrong for his entire life. And at the same time, at this moment, we also find out that Hassan and Amir are blood brothers. Baba broke his one and only sin, theft, when he slept with Ali's wife, Sanaubar, and ended up having Hassan as his kid. He stole that knowledge of the truth from Hassan, from Ali, from Amir for his entire life. And here it finally hit Amir why Baba treated Hassan the way he did when he was a kid, and why he reacted that way when Ali and Hassan had to move. And so with this knowledge, he finds out that he actually betrayed his brother, his blood brother. And obviously this shouldn't make a difference, but to Amir it does. And you'd think that when you're given the opportunity to do something good for your family, you would jump at that. But no, he is completely opposed to it. He's scared of being responsible for the loss of another person in his life. Huh? Like, obviously there's gonna be some risk, but this is your nephew we're talking about. It's up to you, man. You can help him. You can save him. And eventually he does end up deciding to do the right thing, but with reluctance. And the closest he gets to achieving forgiveness is when he faces Asaf once again, after he returns to Afghanistan and is searching for Sohrab. So Asaf is a Taliban official, and he has Sohrab and is molesting him and using him for his own entertainment. And so in order to save Sohrab, Amir must fight Asaf to the death. And during the fight, there's a point when Amir is getting absolutely destroyed by Asaf. I mean, absolutely pummeled. And he has this moment of clarity where he's like finally getting the punishment that he craved when he was a boy at the pomegranate tree. He's like getting this divine justice finally by getting beat up by Asaf. I mean, he smiles, he laughs. He says, okay, yeah, this is it. I'm okay with dying right now. I finally feel peace. Are you kidding me? This man is still thinking about himself. Like, okay, and what about Sohrab? The whole point of this fight is to save him, and you're just gonna be like, yeah, I'll just die. It's Joe. No. This man. On that note, let's move into our last part. Now, the biggest question up for interpretation, I think, is whether Amir truly ever redeemed himself. Throughout the entire story, it's evident that he only ever thinks about himself when he does things. All the way until, I think the last instance would be the betrayal of Sarab, when he attempts to kill himself. Like, all the way up until that point, we're wondering, did he save Sarab for himself? To, I don't know, make up for all the bad stuff he did when he was younger and throughout his entire life? Is he doing it for himself, or is he actually doing it for the right reason, to save this young boy who is in need of help, who is his family, and who is the son of his best friend that he betrayed so long ago, in order to preserve the memory of Hassan? The question is quite difficult to answer, and I don't even know if I can answer it, but I think there's a moment where he redeems himself, and it's quite a small moment, but I think it signified a great shift in Amir's head. It's when Sarab has just been brought back from America. It's like the first night, and so it's Amir, Soraya, and her parents are sitting at the dining table, and her father, General Taheri, says, "Why is there a Hazara boy in our house?" Basically, like, why is there a Hazara boy laying on the couch in the living room? And to this, Amir responds by just telling him everything, his entire journey, from Hassan all the way up until saying that Sarab is his blood nephew. And he tells General Taheri right to his face to never call Sarab a Hazara boy ever again, because he is family and this is his home. This is, I think, the first time that Amir had ever in his life stood up for anything, let alone himself. Like, he never stood up for anyone. And I feel like this is the first time when he really did stick up for someone for a reason other than, like, himself. So at this moment, Amir, I don't think he really truly redeems himself, because in my opinion, I don't think it's possible to define what redemption even means in this situation, because there's so many nuances and people involved and things like that, but it is a start. Amir is beginning his transformation into the person that Rahim Khan and Baba wanted him to be and raised him to be. Someone who stands up for others, who can't really stand up for themselves. And he continues to do this while Sarab is staying with them in America. People at first were extremely, I guess, against it, or confused and wanting to know why this boy was here and why does he never speak. But Amir just stood by him through that and didn't let them affect his view that he needed to provide for this boy and give him everything that nobody gave him. And yeah, with that, I think that's a great spot to wrap it up for this video. Yeah, this book does a really great job at displaying these real life themes and scenarios. And honestly, I could talk for hours about this book and everything about it, but I don't have enough time. I just highly recommend giving it a read. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.